everybody. Welcome. My name is Amy Patterson, and I'm the Executive Director of the Connecticut Land Conservation Council. And for those of you that don't know, CLCC, we are the umbrella organization for the land conservation community here in Connecticut, and we work mostly with the state's land trusts. Every year, when DEEP announces its new round of the Open Space and Watershed Land Acquisition Grant Program and the Urban Green and Community Garden Program, we co-host together a session, an info session, to provide you with an overview of both of those programs. And this year we're doing that, but we are also going to add some information about some other state programs as well as federal programs that are very relevant to the OSWA grant program for all of you. So a couple of housekeeping comments, and then we're going to just launch right in. The first is, if you wouldn't mind muting yourself. It looks like everybody here is muted. Keep yourself muted throughout the presentation. If you have questions, please type them into the chat. At the conclusion of the full presentation, we will be going through those chat questions to make sure we hit as many of them as possible. And then if we have some time beyond the chat questions, we'll open it up to all of you, ask you to turn on your screens so that you can raise your hand and go ahead and ask your question right here in the room. What else did I want to say? Oh, and it also is helpful to save on some bandwidth, and it's less distracting if you could turn off, once we pull up the PowerPoint, if you could just turn off your screen unless you are presenting. It is helpful for those that are presenting not to see too much movement in the background as well. And the format for this tonight is going to be, again, full presentation. We'll be hitting the state programs first, and then talking about the federal programs, and then a couple of CLCC programs that are very much relevant to OSWA, which we will do at the very end. So without further ado, I want to turn this over to Lindsay Soar. Lindsay is the Office Director for Land and Acquisition Management at DEEP, and that is the office that handles all of the OSWA and the Urban Green and Community Garden Grant projects. So Lindsay, take it away. And thanks everybody again for coming, and we look forward to hearing your questions.
Thanks, Amy. It's nice to see all of you guys on this call. Like Amy said, if you have questions, keep them to the end. We'll have a couple people monitoring the chat, and then also, we have a couple people on here from DEEP who can answer questions that are specific. So it'll be easier if we do it at the end. So without further ado, I will share. Okay. So the first one that I'm going to talk about, it's not actually a grant program at DEEP, but it's part of the Land Acquisition and Management Office. It's the acquisitions program at DEEP, which is called the Recreation and Natural Heritage Trust Program. It's for our state acquisitions, similar to what many land trusts are looking to do. We acquire property ourselves to put towards the open space goals of Connecticut. We work with willing sellers. We have an application form. So if you're interested in seeing that, it's on our website. Just provides description of the features, maps, and what we're looking for in order to move property forward. Once a property gets into our system, we have a meeting, quarterly. Sometimes it's a little less than that, to talk about and rank properties for acquisition. And that brings together various departments within DEEP. And if a property makes it onto our list, it's prioritized, and DEEP staff will then take the next steps. We currently have one major staff member who works on acquisitions for DEEP, so sometimes our list gets a little bit long, but we will move through as time allows. And the big reason I wanted to bring this up was because many times land trust municipal staff are some of our best contacts for bringing properties to our attention, for reaching out if there's properties that you think would make sense to add to, current DEEP properties, or, add to a greenway within towns. and you think it makes sense for a deep acquisition. Also, sometimes you're the best contacts with local commissions, the best contacts with local citizens. And so you might know a land that becomes available way sooner than we do. So if you do and you think it's good for deep, certainly let us know. So since 1998, we've preserved 51,000 acres and continuing to preserve acres every day. We have pretty good funding at this time. It hasn't always been the case, but we have pretty good funding at this time. So we're consistently acquiring new property within deep's parcels. And if you have any questions or want more information about open spaces that deep protects, Matt Starr is the best contact within our office. You can also just Google, instead of writing down this website, you can just Google Open Space Connecticut, and this website will come up, and it'll have information about this. It'll have information about our open space and UGCG grants as well. And briefly, I wanted to bring up another program that's always of interest to land trusts and municipalities. This program is not run out of the Land Acquisition and Management Office. It's a separate program, recreational trails program within the Parks Department at Deep, but it provides funding for the same groups, nonprofits, municipalities, to do trails projects throughout the state. As you can see, you can do planning and design and construction, maintenance and restoration, and acquisition with this program. So it's pretty good. It doesn't need a ton of match. As you can say, it can pay up to 80% of the total project costs, which is pretty good for a grant program. And the contact for that is Kim Bradley. She's out of our Rec Trails program out of the Parks Department. I'm going to turn it over briefly to Jamie Sidoriak, who runs our Urban Green and Community Garden program, for a few slides, and then we'll jump back into the open space program after that.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jamie Sidoriak, and I'll be talking briefly about Deep's Urban Green and Community Garden Grant Program. Some folks on this call might remember this slide deck from when CLCC generously invited us to their annual conference at Wesleyan University in March. So forgive us for any repetitive slides, but the information is the same. So this program is actually administered under statute section 7131, which is actually the same or nestled underneath of OSWA, which more information under OSWA will be provided after my slides. So those entities eligible under this program are municipalities, specifically municipalities that are or can be designated as distressed or targeted investment communities. So those are under statute. And projects under this program have to be not only on municipally owned land under those categories, but like if there's going to be a non-profit co-sponsor, we need to see a formal agreement between the municipality and the nonprofit for the project that is proposed. Next slide. I can't move it.
Sorry, I pressed the button. It's not going. Hold on. There we go.
So projects under this program must create, enhance, or restore public community garden or green spaces in those urban areas. The urban areas being in targeted distressed communities or distressed municipalities. And in their applications to us, sponsors must show us how the public will access the site and enjoy the site. And if public access isn't shown, we may not evaluate or award that. And as always, remember, this program is nestled underneath of OSWA. Funds cannot be used for intensive versus passive recreational uses, such as splash pads, swimming pools, washing, bathroom facilities, athletic fields, intensive playgrounds, dog parks, etc. And funds cannot be used to accommodate commercial uses. So this program cannot fund the creation of areas that will eventually be for profit sale of goods. And last but not least, projects cannot be on land which was acquired by the municipality by eminent domain. So the projects which have been historically funded under this program include those which are included with what you would think about creating raised bed gardens, such as lumber, the hardware to put together these raised bed gardens, the soil, the mulch to fill the raised bed gardens, perimeter fencing. Fencing is okay because we want to ensure that not only animals, but maybe neighbors don't get in, that we don't wish to be there. Signage to explain that this project was funded by the state under this program and that this is a publicly available urban green and community garden area. Edible plants. So we're saying vegetables, perennial plants. So pollinator plants, pollinator garden plants, trees. So we like trees that will provide shade in urban areas. And of course, nothing on the Connecticut invasive plant list. We will also fund under this program water irrigation and watering tanks, things, these infrastructure that will help you to produce the edible plants and perennial plants. We need you to be able to water these plants. We also support, as we do under the OSWA program, ADA accessible pathways. We want to make sure that these areas are accessible to all people. So we also support hoop houses and row crop covers and trellises that support the growth of edible plants. Hand tools, which is not to be confused with powered tools. So we support funding tools like shovels and hoes and rakes, but any mechanical or gas powered tools have to be, the cost for that has to be borne by the sponsor. Professional services. So we will support sponsors expending resources on the production of plan sets that show us what they're going to do, how they're going to do it. And this is really important because we really need to see what's going to be done and how is it going to be done. So that's really important, and we will support the production of those plans. And finally, while we have supported some structures under this program, we truly encourage smaller tool sheds to protect the tools like shovels and hoes and rakes, and seating benches so folks can sit down and enjoy their lunch or their picnic at these nice outdoor environments in the urban environment. However, we're not really supportive of kiosks, lamps and lighting, because they are associated with more intensive trenching and installing of electrical utilities. Large pavilions for non-gardening or outdoor recreational purposes. In other words, pavilions that cannot be demonstrated for, or they cannot be not demonstrated for related purposes to this garden area that is the subject of your application. So this is a reimbursement grant program, and the state DEP only matches 50% of a total project cost. So arbitrarily, if your total project cost is $100,000, the state will only match up to $50,000. And you have to, the sponsor has to demonstrate match for the remaining $50,000. That could be through in-kind donated materials. So show that you will, or the sponsor will chip in for lumber, hardware, row cover crop, irrigation materials, or professional services that the sponsor, the municipality, is going to spend resources on hiring the landscape architect or the surveyor to make the design plans. Volunteer labor, you can demonstrate that over the course of the contract, certain folks will be spending their time, which can be calculated, to help monitor and maintain this area. And lastly, if the municipality has any like set aside funds or other contributions that can be accounted towards the 50% match. So when you submit your application to us, it is important, first and foremost, that you demonstrate that the parcel at which the project will occur is owned by the municipality. And you'll support that by giving us, the agency, the property deed and any associated mapping. If there's a co-sponsor, a nonprofit, or other entity that will be assisting the municipality with performing or delivering the project outcomes, then we have to see a clear agreement that is clear and signed by both the municipality and the co-sponsor. So we at the agency are understanding of what those responsibilities are and who is going to deliver them. Then, of course, the project narrative and how does it fit the community need? How is ADA accessibility going to be accommodated? Site plan drawings. As I mentioned, it is important that we see what the project entails, not just an articulation in the narrative, but we need to see a drawing. Ideally, your project is going to be better evaluated or evaluated higher if you can show us a plan that shows exactly what's going to happen and where. And then explain to us how it's going to be operated and maintained and stewarded, not only during the grant contract period, which is usually 5 years, but forward from that. So it demonstrates to us that this is a viable project, and there's support, and this is worthy of investment. And of course, tell us what the total cost is and how you're going to meet that 50% cost share. And a clear budget. We need items and units and costs and what you expect, what the sponsor or the municipality expects for what the DEP will cover under this Urban Green and Community Garden Grant Program versus the required match and the sources. So is it going to come from the municipality? Is it going to come from the potential nonprofit co-sponsor? That needs to be clear. And just like with OSWA, we like to see evidence that the project is consistent with the municipal local plan of conservation and development and local letters of support from the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen, or whatever the leadership structure is at your municipality. And if the municipality has been granted a urban greening community garden grant program in the past, we'd like to see evidence that they have complied with any of our requirements in the past. So after municipalities have undergone the application process and the agency, our office, has evaluated it and been able to successfully award a grant, there are a couple steps that need to happen before we can actually deliver any funds. So before any work can be performed under the proposal, the DEEP, our agency, our office, needs to prepare a grant contract that has to be signed by the town or the municipality and the commissioner. And sometimes if it's specifically over a certain amount, $25,000, it has to be signed by the Office of the Attorney General. So this is crafted with the scope of work and the budget that was provided to us with your application. And it's not until that's fully executed that the municipality and the sponsors can actually start to submit for payment reimbursement. So this to say, we caution you, caution, just because you've submitted an application, do not begin work and expect a payment until we've been able to award you and execute this contract. So in short, we've been able to provide over $2.5 million to municipalities for this program, and we look forward to providing more and expanding this program statewide. So we did not provide a visual of our application and our FAQs or frequently asked questions, but if you'd like to see that, I am very welcome to going over those with you if you want to after this.
Thank you, Jamie. And so like she said, you can contact her, or you can, again, if you type in open space Connecticut, it'll take you to, basically it's the land acquisition and management page, and it will take you to all of our programs, which this is also on that page. Okay. So I'm going to dive into our open space and land and watershed acquisition program. This is for permanent interests in land, fee acquisitions or conservation easements. Typically we do we are providing funding for fee acquisitions, but occasionally land trusts or municipalities will come in with just a conservation easement acquisition. And so that is also an option. As I like to caution everybody, forever is a long time. So when I say perpetuity, it means this is to be kept as, you know, passive recreational open space in perpetuity. It's supposed to be kept open to the public forever as well. So if, especially a municipality, land trust is a little different maybe, but especially municipalities, you know, this is not an option to purchase a property and then change it into some other resource later, like a school or a library or other municipal properties. The purpose is to protect natural resources, and specifically, we emphasize public outdoor recreation. So we are asking for, you know, places for the public to access, parking areas, trails to be included in your application process. Just like UGCG, this cannot be for commercial purposes or intensive development. So if it's a park that you're looking to protect for ball fields or pools or splash pads, this is not the program to do that through. It has to be free from contamination when we award the grants. So that's something that sometimes municipalities or land trusts have to investigate further prior to application. And then one big thing which we run into often, and sometimes you don't know when you apply, but a parcel cannot already be committed for public use. So it's a good idea to go to the town land records and, you know, pull the legal documents and see if there's anything listed in the current deed. Sometimes you can go back a little bit further to see what's in past deeds as well, but to just hopefully feel comfortable that this doesn't have something on the land records that's going to prevent it from being funded. This acquisition program does not provide due diligence costs for the program. So things like an appraisal or a survey or legal costs, we don't pay for. So that has to come out of the municipality or from the land trust. Amy and Yao will talk a little bit later about a program for land trust, a limited program for land trust that can go towards some due diligence cost and kind of combine with for OSWA purposes. But through this program, we do not provide due diligence costs. And then at the end, once you've purchased a property, you know, everything's been recorded, we ask for a permanent conservation easement in favor of DEEP that commits it to passive recreation. So that is something that Allison Clark, who is on this call, can answer some more questions on, but it's something that we are doing for every application and award that comes in. We have a template, so it's something that you can take a look at if needed. Eligible entities. So this would be municipalities, nonprofits, which are land trusts, and then water companies, but that can only be for the purchase of class 1 or class 2 land. We want to emphasize that if you were awarded an OSWA project prior to 2020, that you should not apply if the project hasn't been completed or the funding turned back for that project. We try to avoid having a large backlog of projects from 3 years prior, because we want to ensure that this money is getting out the door, and we will continue to get money from the legislators to fund this program. This table shows the maximum grant awards that are allowed. In the middle, the distressed municipality or targeted investment community for resource enhancement or protection, that's 50%. But that's for UGCG grants, but for OSWA grants, it's either 65 or 75%. And that depends on whether you're a distressed municipality or your project is in one of those communities. One important reminder, we cannot give funding if the project closes prior to the closing date of the OSWA application. So sometimes it can long wait, and we apologize for that, but the property cannot be protected and get OSWA funds. So you have to wait until the closing date of the OSWA application before closing on the property. This is our scoring criteria. We have a review team within DEEP and also some outside DEEP. DPH also provides some scoring. And it's based on administrative, environmental justice and equity, public access and outdoor recreation, and climate change and natural resources. So this balances the scoring across the whole, all the 4 main areas that we like to look at. If you have specific questions on where your project would fit in, we could answer that. But generally, these are scored, once we get applications, these are scored by, you know, a group of, I want to say it's probably 10 different individuals score within their own expertise to create a final score that is ranked, you know, highest score to lowest score. And then if there are funding limitations, then we alter either the funding that goes out, or there's a cap, or, you know, lower scores wouldn't get funding. Prior grant compliance is also a big thing. The biggest 2 concerns that we see are an entity saying that they're going to install public access or a parking area, or they're supposed to put up a DEEP acknowledgement sign, and those things have not happened. Sometimes, you know, once we work with you to ensure that that is happening, then we can move forward with a grant, but we take it very seriously. And if you're not compliant, then we won't be releasing funding for the next round. Appraisals. This is some of the due diligence work that needs to be done once a grant is awarded. So actually, no, prior to a grant being awarded, sorry, you need a yellow book appraisal completed and a appraisal review prior to submitting your application. Sorry about that. And then if you're applying for federal funding, the appraisal needs to be for fee simple value and for the easement value. So it has to have both so that we can provide funding through mostly the grant program that we've done most is the Highlands grant program that we've combined funding with our OSWA program for entities. And then in the last, I want to say it's maybe 5 years, we've implemented a completion time frame for different items to try to ensure that grants are moving along. So as you can see, we have up to 24 months to kind of get everything completed. But the hope is that within 18 months, the property will close and we'll have the conservation easement on the land records. And then we'll give an extra, you know, so many months to do the signage and public access trail and parking compliance. Survey mapping sometimes can be a big holdup once the grant is kind of awarded and we move forward. So I have some specifics on what we look for survey mapping, A2 standards. And typically if we can provide these standards to you, it will come in a packet once your grant is awarded. And any surveyor that you hire to do this work will understand, but we can always answer questions if needed. We need a specific coordinate system, a specific format. It needs to be geo-referenced. And then we need to see encroachments and easements and rights of way that are existing on the land so that we can rectify that before moving forward with the grant application. Other things, structures and buildings sometimes come up. We typically don't allow structures and buildings on OSWA projects. Sometimes old foundations are okay, or minor structures, but typically we would have an area, you know, reserved or cut out from the funding purposes if it was going to be acquired with your acquisition. A location map, which I'm going to show kind of a general idea of what one of these survey maps look like, but it'll show specific kind of where it is in the landscape. And then from this survey map, we also want a property description that matches kind of the meets and bounds that go around the property in a clockwise direction, so that we can match it up to the survey and move forward with that with the title research. So this is an example survey. It's probably kind of hard to see because I'd have to zoom way in for you to see the specifics, but you can see the location map up in the right corner. You can see, you know, some of the survey notes that we look for. You can't read them specifically, but you can see the property boundaries are described with directions and lengths for each section of the property. And then we also ask for, you know, the boundary line to be marked, you know, either pins or monuments or something like that in the field, so it can be found when we go out to walk the property. So OSWA, since 1998 has, you know, provided a ton of funding, 157 million to protect over 42,000 acres. I say that's a success, but we would like to continue to provide opportunities for municipalities and land trusts to continue to protect more acreage in Connecticut. And then for questions, Allison is on this call. She will help me and other deep staff answer some questions after the fact here. But again, you can go to Open Space Connecticut and find information on this particular program. And Allison is a wealth of knowledge. She's been doing this for 15 or so years. And she knows the ins and outs of the program pretty extensively. So if you have specific questions, you can always contact her after the fact. A couple other things I'm going to mention, and then I'm going to turn it over to our Land and Water Resources Division. Some land trusts are already familiar with that, but this is an additional funding source that is pass-through funding from the Fish and Wildlife Service. It's called the Highlands Conservation Act, and it's eligible entities are municipalities and nonprofit conservation organizations within the location map that I'm going to show after this slide. So it's really, it's a big chunk of Northwest Connecticut. And we don't solicit through an additional application. We have you either contact us and let us know you're interested, or you think your project fits within this mapping area and the specifics of the grant program, or you indicated on your application to OSWA. And then if projects qualify, they'll be reviewed by deep staff. And if they're selected for this funding, they can be combined with OSWA up to 90% of the project cost. So higher than that spreadsheet that I showed before, which was 65 to 75%. The program priorities for Highlands are what's listed here, specifically, you know, forest and wildlife habitat. In Connecticut, it's not necessarily a requirement of Highlands, but because we run most of the funding through our OSWA program, we require public outdoor recreation to be part of it. That you would put the same easement like we do through our OSWA program for these as well. So we would require passive recreational opportunities. And then here's the map. It's a little hard to read, but we could get a better one for folks after the fact if needed. It's Northeast Connecticut. It goes a little bit further south, but as you can see, it's Connecticut, New York, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. It's a whole area that receives funding for this program, and it's done some pretty good protection over the last 20 years or so. Here we go. Connecticut's received 22 million in grants to conserve 3,737 acres throughout the Highlands since 2004. So it's been helpful to add to the OSWA grants and to provide additional funding to get some of these land conservation projects through the door. For more information, you can contact Matt Starr from our office. We don't have specific information on our website about Highlands, but you can visit the Fish and Wildlife Services website. They have a pretty good information page on the Highlands Conservation Act grant. Now I'm going to turn it over to Mindy to talk a little bit about coastal land acquisition and some new funding sources that have become available for some of the people on this call.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mindy Goslin. I work with DEEP in the Water Bureau in the Land and Water Resources Division. I'm also joined by my supervisor, Kevin O'Brien, who will help me answer any questions that you may have at the end of the presentation. So as Lindsay mentioned, new this year, we have additional funding for coastal land acquisition. So similar to how Highlands works, but for coastal properties. This funding is provided by the EPA Long Island Sound Study, and it's managed by DEEP. The eligible entities include municipalities and nonprofit conservation organizations such as land trusts, and it's solicited through the OSWA grant program. So again, there's no additional application needed. You kind of can qualify through this OSWA grant program, but you can by our DEEP staff. And again, similar to Highlands, if selected, this can be combined with OSWA funds up to 90% of the project costs. So because this is Long Island Sound study money, the program goals and priorities are based on the 2020 to 2024 Long Island Sound Comprehensive Conservation and Management Plan, so the CCMP. So these are the priorities of this funding. And some of those would include protecting wetlands, healthy watersheds, riparian buffers, and open land to minimize land disturbance and impervious cover through land protection, sustainable development, and green infrastructure. And then also conserving, enhancing natural areas and open space to benefit ecosystem function and wildlife, and to benefit public access, recreation, and shoreline community protection. And also to improve access to Long Island Sound and its embayments. So this is our program area. So this is our ecoregion in this reddish pink color. However, this region is not an in or an out. So if you're outside of this region, that does not mean you won't qualify for funding. Priority will just be given to those locations within the pink area. But we do have a watershed focus. So if your project is located within a watershed and aligns with our program goals or priorities, you would qualify for this funding. And then an additional program new this year, we have the NOAA competitive funding. So this is a nationwide NOAA coastal acquisition funding program. And if there is a property that is a good fit, DEEP will submit on behalf of, most likely it's a municipality or some sort of public governmental agency that we will then submit to NOAA for. They're normally larger parcels or sets of parcels that have significant ecological or coastal resilience benefit. So we're going to be against a bunch of other coastal states for this funding. So really think big. These parcels that we're going to be going up against for other states can be hundreds of acres. So these sets of parcels or larger parcels that normally could be out of reach for normal funding could be very competitive in this NOAA program. Some program specifics are municipalities are eligible for funding, but not land trusts. They could be a partner, but municipalities are the main eligible entities. And then there's a different zone for this as well. So this is located within the kelp zone, which will be on the next slide. Yep, so this one right here. So these are the towns that are located within our kelp zone. So if you see your town listed on here and you have one of those large projects, please reach out to me and I can give you further information. So some project priorities of this NOAA competitive funding would be providing access to the general public or to provide another public benefit as appropriate with consistent resource protection. And then also any coastal or estuarine areas that are significant conservation, ecological, historical, or aesthetic recreational values, and also properties that can be effectively managed and protected. And then additionally, kind of also in relation to OSWA and the Long Island Sound Study EPA money, that they are within or can demonstrate, provide benefit to Connecticut environmental justice areas. And if you have any questions or would like more information on any of these programs, this is my contact information.
Thank you, May. I think we're now going to turn it over to Yao at the CLCC, and they're going to talk a little bit about some of the programs for funding they have.
Good evening. My name is Yao. I am the Senior Project Specialist for the Connecticut Land Conservation Council, and I will very briefly cover two of our grant programs that we offer to Land Trust. And the first one is the Connecticut Conservation Partnership Program, or CCPP. And this program is a public-private partnership between CLCC and CTB, and is funded by the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. It's a 5-year federal easement program with a goal of helping Connecticut Land Trust increase the pace of land conservation across the state by being a source of federal match funds when applying to OSWA. And the level of funding for this program can range from 25% to 100% of an easement's value. Next slide, please. And so through this program, we're looking for projects that will deliver these conservation outcomes. So protect freshwater and inland wetlands, avoid forest conversion, increase the sequestration and storage of greenhouse gases, protect wildlife habitat, and increase no-cost access to recreation and experiential education. Next slide, please. And so our other program is the Transaction Assistance Grant Program, or TAG. And this is a reimbursement grant that supports Land Trust transaction-related expenses. And the goal of this program is to help Land Trust initiate new conservation projects, bring projects to a conclusion, and also allow us to be responsive to Land Trust funding needs. So this program is broken up into 2 stages. We have early stage transaction costs and closing stage transaction costs. With early stage transaction costs, Land Trust can apply for funding for appraisals, title searches, and environmental assessments up to $5,000. And with closing stage transaction costs, Land Trust can apply for title searches, title certificate and insurance, surveys, environmental assessments, and recording fees. And Land Trust can be awarded up to $20,000. And that's it from me. And there's my contact information. Please reach out with any questions about the program. And I'd like to turn it over to Amy for a few comments.
Thanks, Yao. I think we can, why don't we put the PowerPoint, we'll stop sharing the screen, Lindsay, and then we can see everybody, and then we can pull up certain slides if need be to support some of the answers to the questions. Lindsay, can you do that?
Yeah, it's not letting me stop sharing. Hold on.
Okay. But while Lindsay's fiddling with the technology here, there's just a couple of comments I wanted to make. And the first is, and Lindsay touched on this. So a priority for CLCC every year is to advocate for adequate funding for the Open Space and Watershed Land Acquisition Grant Program and the Urban Green and Community Garden Program, amongst others, rec trails as well. But for the Land Trust, the OSWA grant program has been a priority, and that has driven our advocacy work at the Capitol. And I'm happy to report that we're doing quite well. There's a lot of money available in that program. There's also a lot of money, as reflected by these presentations tonight, coming from the federal government. There has never been a better time to put your open space and your urban green and community garden projects, for that matter, together. So, you know, I saw the comment, the first comment or a comment within the chat about it's daunting. And I think when you receive information like that, it does seem daunting, and it is daunting. But I will tell you, and the numbers support this, that all volunteer land trusts, community groups partnering with their municipalities have been doing these projects since these programs' inception, and they've been doing them successfully. And the challenge has been more from the monetary standpoint, in that there just hasn't been enough money to meet the demand. But now the state of Connecticut is really, you know, it's stepping it up. And there is money there. And so I would not let the information stop you from pursuing a grant. And at a minimum, just reaching out. The staff at DEEP, I can't say enough about Lindsay and her team, as well as the folks from the other division that you heard from tonight. reach out and ask those questions, and also to us. CLCC has helped so many land trusts and their communities over the years in answering questions related to applications. And through that team effort, we've had multiple successes. So I really understand why this information can seem overwhelming, because it all at once especially. But trust me when I say it's doable, and I really encourage you to pursue your projects. So that was me on the soapbox, and I'll get off for a second. And then I think what we should do now, I was just looking to see if I had anything else to say. Nope, I think that was it for now. I think we'll go to the questions, and I'm gonna read these questions out. And then we will open up, once we get through these, we can open up the floor to anybody else who has a question. So get to it. All right. If somebody else sees a question and I haven't gotten there yet, please jump in. So one thing I wanted to emphasize for the Urban Green and Community Garden program, and Jamie did say this, but it's worth repeating, is that that program is only offered to targeted and distressed communities. And if you're wondering if you are a targeted or distressed community, you can find that information in the application packet. And again, all that information is on the DEEP's website. And get into my first question here. Can you clarify, this is from Alan, can you clarify public access requirements for an OSWA grant, especially quality of the access road? Can it be a dirt road? Must it be cleared of snow in the winter? Maybe Allison wants to tackle that one.
Yeah, Allison, I don't know if you want to answer some questions, and if if you need support, let me know.
Yeah, and you're on mute, Allison.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Allison Clark. I'm the grant administrator for the OSWA program. Regarding the public access, I usually say to people, think of it as, you're driving down the road and you see an open space parcel and you go, oh, wow, there's a sign. It's open. If this is preserved and it's open to the public, and oh, look, there's a little parking area, and gee, I can see the trail, or, that is ideal. If the property has frontage on a street, we will, require parking for a minimum of 2 to 3 cars, and we will want the sign to be right out there so everyone can see it, not just the people, looking on the land trust or the municipality webpage. It should just be visible by the general public just driving by. I can't tell you, I'm looking for them all the time when I'm driving down the road. Oh, gee, there's a new place I can check out. So that's the ideal. If the property doesn't have frontage on a public street, we will allow access from an adjacent property only if the land trust or the municipality owns the adjacent property. So if you're a land trust applying and you're saying, well, the parking area or the access is going to be from an abutter, it's a town-owned property, that doesn't qualify, because technically, that town could someday turn it into a church or a school, and it's not owned by the applicant. So again, if you own the adjacent property, you can use that for public access if you don't have street frontage. To the question about being a dirt road for access, that's fine. Gravel, dirt is actually our preference. We want to minimize impervious surfaces. So yes, to the dirt road, that's great. A lot of the properties that we see have existing wood roads, and those become the public access trails. So, again, little parking area. Some people put much larger parking, that's fine, encouraged, but we do want to see in your application that you're going to provide for at least 2 or 3 cars. You're going to have a sign visible to the public, and, there's a public access trail or some other means of public access on the property. There was one other question. Oh, does it need to be cleared in the winter? No, we don't require that. You could promote cross-country skiing. So, people like the snow too, walk through the snow, snowshoeing, there's other uses for snow. So what past couple winters, we haven't had much snow. It hasn't been an issue. Hopefully it won't be what 1 or 2 big snowstorms that it happens anyway. So we won't require snow removal.
Thank you, Allison. And I do want to emphasize how helpful Allison is in handling all these applications and the projects and all the questions. So thank you, Allison. Wanted to give you that shout out publicly here. Next question, are hayfields maintained by a local farmer as open habitat considered commercial benefit? This is from Brian.
If I may assist to answer that, I'm not sure if it was for the OSWA or the UGCG program in particular. Folks who know me may know that I have a soft spot for grassland nesting birds such as bobolinks, and I know at Joshua's Trust at one hayfield they have set aside for protection of the declining bobolinks. So while we attempt to be as objective in our evaluation of all of our applications as possible, you know, we do evaluate every project case by case. And personally speaking, Allison and Lindsay can chime in. I would consider any areas set aside specifically for the protection or habitat conservation for these declining or grassland bird species would be considered as habitat conservation and not commercial purposes, because I understand that farmers are actually getting a marginal or less valuable to their purposes grass when they go to mow and so on. So that's actually like a lesser value to them, whereas it's a very valuable habitat management component. So that's what I'll say for that.
I would also add, Jamie, though, that we do allow some agricultural use on OSWA properties. Typically, if there is some agricultural use, we hope that there's another section that will allow for trails or public access. But agricultural use is not completely cut out from open space applications. Amy, I think the next one is actually for UGCG.
One little sidebar comment here, if you don't mind. The
Yep.
one thing that will come up if there is a lease and the applicant, the municipality or the land trust is making money on that lease for that purpose, whether it be hayfields or maple syrup tapping. Sorry, my daughter's calling. But if there's any money coming in, we do require that the money be put towards the management of the property. They can't just bank it and keep that money. So any money made from that commercial use has to be, you know, again, put toward the property. If there's a lease in effect at the time of the application, the Attorney General's office will commonly ask that the lessee, the farmer, subordinate that lease to the conservation easement. So that's just a little bit of red tape we have to take care of there. If it happens after the conservation easement's recorded, say the town decides to do this after the fact, it's fine, we will allow it. We just have to, you know, dot our I's and cross our T's. We will say, you know, that's fine, but you do have to get our permission to have that use, especially if there's a lease in place and money transpiring. It's kind of a gray line there. Is it a commercial use or not? But if you ask permission, typically we will allow it. It's just we have to make sure that, you know, everything is properly handled.
And the next question I asked for clarification, and it was personally from Kathy about the Urban Breeding Community Garden Program, but she also acknowledged that this could also apply to OSWA. So it is, our support letters the only means of assessing community input into the design of a project? Does community input into design factor into application evaluation?
They're helpful, they're required, but we are welcome to receive any other input such as evaluations on census tract or environmental justice, community or affordable housing, location to or proximity to transportation, any and all information that will help us evaluate that. So it doesn't have to be just a letter of support from, I mean, depending on the situation. So if the municipal parcel happens to be where the school is located, for instance, then yes, we should be seeing a letter of support from the Board of Education stating that the proposal for the urban green or community garden located on the school property is consistent with their plans. But like, that's very specific. So, but if there's a proposal on a different municipal owned property, we welcome any and all information expanding beyond just the letters of support from planning and zoning, inland wetlands, or those municipal departments. So it could include land trusts, or, as I mentioned, if there are any environmental justice or other community groups that we can hear from, that would be helpful too.
Yeah, and I think if you're talking about like community meetings that you've done and you've designed those kinds of things, that can go into your narrative, and it will definitely be something that we take into account when we're evaluating your applications.
And I guess for OSWA, in the application, it does provide you with a checklist of the types of support letters that DEEP is seeking when evaluating your application. So certainly I advise you to take a look at the applications and then gather your questions and reach out for some assistance. The next question is from Kat. If we don't apply this year, will grants be similar next year? Or, and I'm sorry, I have it blocked. It's like something's blocking it, but or a longer interval, 2 or 3 years. I'm assuming she needs it. That I just can't see it. Would have to wait a longer interval, 2 or 3 years.
So at this point, we have been pretty consistent the last few years, where it's been announced like April, May, with a closing date or sometime in September or October. And we have consistent funding right now. So the plan is to offer this a similar time each year.
And again, we at CLCC, we advocate for that very strongly, and it's been very consistent over the last few years with funding sources starting to increase. So again, great time to apply. Julie's question, I'm not clear, can land trusts qualify for the NOAA program, or is it only for municipalities?
So NOAA can't award to non-governmental agencies, which means land trusts cannot hold the title to the land.
Yeah. They can be partners that help put some application materials together and help municipalities through the process, but they can't actually be the holder.
Okay, thank you.
And next question from Brian. Yao, you can take this one. Since TAG is a reimbursement grant, can we apply after closing on the property?
Yes, you can, though we do have a slight preference for actually applying before you close on the property. And you have to keep in mind that your expenses must fall within a specific coverage period. So we are currently in our spring ground application period, so expenses must fall between March 1st, 2023 and October 31st, 2023. So as long as your expenses are within that period, yes, you can apply after closing.
Thanks, Yao. And unless I missed any questions, it looks like all of them have been asked and answered. And so I would encourage you, if you have a question now that has popped into your head or you've been reticent to ask it up until this time, go ahead and put yourself on video and jump right in. And if we have too many people at once, I'll ask you to raise your hand. But it seems like a small, polite group. So please don't hesitate to jump right in. Anybody? All right. Well, I'm going to recap again for those of you that came in late. This PowerPoint, as well as this recording, will be available. The Connecticut Land Conservation Council, if you're not on our e-news list, please sign up. We are at ctconservation.org, and you will be notified both as a registrant for tonight, but also just generally when you get our e-news, when these materials, as well as any other materials related to these and other programs, are available. We publicize them constantly. And again, it is a very, very exciting time to be looking for funding for your projects, because between the state and the feds, there's a lot of money out there. Other than that, I guess I want to turn it back over to Lindsay to see if she has any closing comments tonight before we shut down.
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you for attending tonight. Again, we know that this was a lot of information, that the programs can seem daunting, but we really encourage you, reach out to one of us on this call who did some part of the presentation. We're happy to answer questions. We're happy to, send you additional information to answer very specific things that you have about your project, so that we can get more projects into the pipeline and fund more projects across the state. So definitely reach out. I know it might feel overwhelming now, but I think we can definitely get there with a little extra help. So thank you again. And it looks like we can give people back 20 minutes, which is exciting.
That is exciting. Thanks, everybody. And I do want to give a special shout out again to our colleagues at DEEP for joining us tonight on an evening and providing us with this information. And with that, I just put my email in the text, as did Jamie, or in the chat. And so don't hesitate to reach out in the interim before we have this material available to you. So have a great night, everybody. I'm going to